Hey board gamers, it's Mike Cassie and welcome to another Weirdwood Manor board game vlog episode number... So in the last episode, I took some time to put together some game ideas for Paul and the team, and now it's time to pitch them. We had booked the entire day, which was awesome. We had lots of time for me to show the ideas to them and talk about them and discuss them. And I think I've talked about this before. If you're pitching a game to a publisher, you probably don't have a lot of time to hold their attention and get them hooked on your idea. And thankfully, I didn't really have that challenge since we were going to spend the entire day looking at these things. And since Paul and his team had a vested interest in this, we were already working together and we were already a team. So I started to roll through each idea one at a time with the team, where I basically described everything and walked them through what my vision was for that game and how it'll work.
Okay, so we've got 6 ideas that I'm going to pitch to you. I use the word pitch really loosely. This isn't going to be a pitch in the sense I'm not trying to sell you on any of the ideas. I want to explain the ideas so we all understand them and we can make some decisions about what we like and don't like and how we move forward. From my perspective, all the ideas become final games that I think would be good games and I think slot into different aspects of Weirdwood and what we're trying to do. That being said, in terms of this meeting, my expectation is I think it's doubtful we'll come out of this meeting and say, that's the idea, go ahead with that one. Could happen, but I think it's also equally likely that there may be multiple ideas that we all like and you guys want to think about, that we want to maybe flesh out a little bit more, or even different pieces from different ideas that we might even say, hey, what if we put this into that?
So at the end of each idea, we paused and took some time to discuss that idea and kind of go through a variety of thoughts that I might have and the team might have. That might start with something like just basic questions from the team so they better understood exactly what it was I was proposing.
Maybe I missed this. Just the basic mechanic of repelling and battling the Fae. How do they do that? Is that like dice? Is it?
Don't know, to be determined.
Okay.
I didn't tell you. That's
Right.
So you didn't miss it.
Right.
I don't know. But the idea is we want an additional external threat here, and the Fae represent that well.
Right.
So they both are messing with the player's ability to get everything back in order, and they also threaten Lady Weirdwood at the same time. So, yeah, it's to be determined what that mechanic will be. I mean, this is a scenario where when you get into starting to design the details of a game design like this, like you get into it and you say, that battling's got to be super simple because we've got lots of cognitive load elsewhere. So this has got to be super simple mechanic. Or, it can be a little more complicated and it can weave into the other things in these other areas. So, yeah.
So the win-lose on this is you saved the mana, you lost the mana. Right?
Lady Weirdwood died. Yeah,
but if she dies, have you lost the game?
You lost the game if she dies, yes.
And sometimes it was just some discussion, some general discussion about board game mechanics or approaches to the game, things that kind of popped into our heads based on the idea that I was currently pitching to the team.
It's interesting, like with Defenders of the Realm, there's strategy and thinking and mechanic, as you're saying, and I could tell from the board, they had cool locations and cool minis and it all felt really cool, but I don't feel like I learned anything about the world it exists in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Whereas Forgotten Waters, it's pirates, which it's not something I am super excited about personally as a pirate story, but you really got in and you felt like you knew who the different characters were and this and that, and
that's a good
so
point. Yeah.
In terms of just the overall people feeling they're getting into the overall brand and experiencing it, something more narrative plays well into that.
Right.
But this does feel like it's like the advantage is that it's simple, it's narrative, you can kind of get in. People who aren't gamers, I feel like it's more mass audience, whereas the mechanic, I can still just see that first game on Kickstarter and people thinking oh my gosh, this, the concentric circles, the tiles,
And sometimes it was because someone in the team had a really interesting idea or thought about things we could do in that particular design, or even some ideas that might be used in another place at another time. It was really that process of where when you're in a room with someone and you say, hey, why don't we do this? It makes them think of something else and they say, hey, why don't we do this? And you're batting the ideas back and forth and you come up with things you might never have thought of otherwise.
So one idea is that we have this meandering hall which shifts based on what time it is. And because we have this kind of circular pattern, we could maybe have a clock overlay mechanism that shifts it, and based on maybe a card tells you what time it is. And the time could go backwards and forwards as well, or you could have just at the end of the round, the clock shifts. And we could make it in such a way that it shifts we can make a mechanism that makes it shift in a way that's like unexpected too.
Right. Okay. So I was gonna say the shifting isn't a predictable thing based on the time. It's always the same based on a certain time generally. Is that thematically how it works in Weirdwood?
Yeah, it's confusing.
Okay.
Purposefully confusing.
Flexible.
It's very flexible.
Okay.
I thought mechanically about the shifting. The shifting could be done without a movable board. They're just tiles. So each of those rings is actually a number of tiles. You just pick one up, put a different one down. That's gonna have more cells, different pathways. So you can do it without. You can do exactly the same, but without rotating.
And then sometimes the feedback was just them saying, "Hey, this is cool. We like this."
I love your thinking here.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that I don't think you're gonna beat this for me.
Okay.
So
Well.
let's see where we get to.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Cool. I've got a preferred order of these games. I won't let on to it is what it is right now. But that's okay. That's good to know. Okay. Cool.
Or sometimes it was because that they didn't like the idea that much.
It's not as rich. I think you're right. It's not as rich as some of the other games here.
Okay.
And I do feel like the basic proposition of do all of this. The reason is build a beast, battle them. It doesn't feel right, does it?
Feels more like Pacific Rim, right?
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
So then, after all 6 pitches and the discussion after each one, we kind of were nearing the end of the day, and even though we were starting to get pretty tired after it's a lot of information to take in, we decided to have one last general discussion, and that was really to kind of now look at all 6 ideas and kind of compare and contrast those ideas to figure out were the ones that we particularly liked and what were going to be the next steps in terms of moving forward. There was always a chance that maybe one game would rise to the top, and that's where we move forward with just that one game. But more than likely, we were going to find things that we liked across different games, and it wasn't going to be necessarily so clear cut.
So my read on if we're looking at 1, 2, and 6 from a Kickstarter perspective, I think these all potentially could be really good games on Kickstarter. So 1, I think the rotating board and a centerpiece that's got cool appeal. The second one, done well with an app, will have cool appeal. That's still kind of a really fresh space for board games. The 6th game is probably I'll say the most conventional design in terms of the board game world.
What do you want to get out of this? Because it seems like we're already at a point where if what you want out of this is 3 games to go and do a deeper dive on, you've already got it.
Yeah, I think it's really, for me, I think 1, 2, and 6 are floating to the top. I guess the question is it make sense taking cycles, looking at 2 more? I mean, if you can't give me a decision, you're like, we should look at it. I'm not certain about whether we want to do a game with an app. Let's look at it more. We can do that. But I think that, at least for 2, is a bit of a dividing line.
I kind of have been waffling over time whether like we do something with an app. Like there's part of this that I say I think we're Wasabi. Like this is kind of what we do is mix platforms.
Right.
But are we mixing platforms within an existing execution, or is it that we do IP and it's on multiple platforms, you know? Because especially with number 2, it's not just an app, it's like if I look at the, what is it, 4, the Mastermind, whatever.
Right, that's a fairly simple,
app.
That's a simple app.
Where we're creating content, like the app for number 2 for quests, that's content.
I don't think anybody's glued on number 2 because they think we've got to do a Forgotten Waters clone. I think it's because it's a narrative game. And it's almost like we'd like there to be a narrative game that we're considering amongst our top 2 or 3.
Right. Yeah,
and it's almost like which of these could be a best narrative game.
Yeah.
You know.
I feel like I'd be okay if we just wanted to look at 1 and 6 and say how can we make them a bit more narrative.
Sure.
And
okay.
you know.
And you know, and something else I may come up with like sort of new idea that hybrids between some of the stuff as well.
Sure.
Okay, cool.
So after all that discussion, we came away with some really good consensus, and that was basically that everyone really liked idea number 1, which was the shifting Bacropolis, and everyone also felt pretty strongly about idea number 6, which was the Lords of Weirdwood. As well, people liked idea number 2, which was the Bacropolis quests, but as a team, we had some concerns about whether we could take on that degree of content when it came to a really narrative-heavy, potentially app-driven game. So the final takeaway from all of that was, let's take a deeper dive into idea number 1 and idea number 6, and let's look for opportunities to maybe try and pull in a bit of number 2, the narrative gameplay into those two other ideas. So where does that leave me? Well, it leaves me to do some more work on idea number 1 and idea number 6 and try and flesh out those designs a lot more, get a lot more detail out down on the table, on the paper, so that I can come back to Paul and the team again and essentially do another round of pitch sessions. But in this case, probably just pitching those two particular ideas, but giving them a lot more insight into what those games will look like so we can make a better decision on whether one of those two are the one to proceed with. So I hope you'll join me in the next episode when I start to take a deeper dive into those two ideas and try and flesh them out. I also hope between now and then that if you've got any thoughts about the ideas that you liked and things that resonated with you, leave them in the comments. I'd love to read those. It'd be super helpful, and maybe one of you will throw out an idea that'll be the key to the next game that we're doing. And lastly, as always, please subscribe and like and turn on the notifications. You know the whole routine. So thanks again, board gamers. I'll see you next time, and keep gaming.